Hello and welcome to Shauns Take, brought to you by the Keystone Sports Network. Here are your hosts, Jim and Shaun.
Hello and welcome to Shauns Take, brought to you by the Keystone Sports Network. I am Jim Galante. He is Shaun Gold. Shaun, how we doing this week?
Jim, we're doing good. I know we have the NFL draft on board today. Always love the NFL draft, as we talked about last weekend. So it was a fun watch, some good moves, some things to talk about. I'm excited.
Definitely, yes. A week ago, we did the preview. Now we do the postscript, the follow-up, the review. And just in general, what stood out to you about the draft this year? Anything in particular?
To be honest, there wasn't. I feel like it was more of a vanilla draft. I don't think we saw too many big shocks, which normally, you'll see a couple wow factor moves in this one. I think maybe besides Ty Simpson to the Rams at 13, which if you break it down, you could go either way, that made a lot of sense, or that's a crazy reach. I don't think there was anything that, threw me too off guard in this draft, which you normally don't leave a draft saying.
Yes, that was the case. And I'm glad you brought up Ty Simpson, because the first thing I did is I went back to my notes from last week and literally used the words we all knew Fernando Mendoza was going to go number one. And then in talking about the quarterbacks, it was Ty Simpson, right? He's next. And when's he going to go? Those were my notes from a week ago. Well, we found out. And I do think it was a bit of a surprise that he went number 13 to the Rams, who, oh, by the way, have a pretty good quarterback already. And the interesting thing to me about this, and we'll talk about, more of the quarterbacks, but I always have this conversation. The quarterbacks, no matter where they are projected to go, they always go earlier than expected, because it just takes one GM to say, I want that guy. And the Rams GM, he wanted Ty Simpson. I'm sure it didn't necessarily make Matthew Stafford happy. Sean McVay, I'm not sure how pleased he was to go that route. How surprised were you, Ty Simpson, round one to the Rams?
When the pick happened, I was shocked, but I understand it from the Rams standpoint. I'm not saying that I would make the same pick if I was sitting there, but look, Ty Simpson's going to sit for the next 3 years, most likely. Matthew Stafford, fresh off an MVP season, still arguably a top 5, maybe even a top 3 quarterback in the NFL with the way he just played. This is not going to be Ty Simpson's team anytime soon, but it does set up for a very nice, smooth transition after Matthew Stafford's era is over. With that being said, though, was it the right move for the Rams to make right now? Obviously, they really like Ty Simpson as a prospect. And I know Sean McVay afterwards in the press conference did not seem too pleased. He wasn't in the best mood and everything. I think that's a little bit overblown, because Sean McVay has such a great relationship with the Rams organization that if he was adamant against this pick, I don't think that general management would have just gone and made that pick. So I think Sean McVay definitely signed off on this pick and will be excited to work with Ty Simpson, and knows that he has his quarterback for the next 10 years after Matthew Stafford. But when your Super Bowl window is so wide open right now, it's hard when you have the 13th pick in the draft to not go and get an immediate day one impact player. You could have gone receiver, which isn't a huge need. You got Devontae Adams and Puka Nacua, but there were receivers that they were interested in. You could have gone defense. There were impactful players available at that pick that could have helped the Rams win this year, not 4 years from now. So that's where my struggle with this pick goes, even though the Rams right now still have a Super Bowl caliber roster.
And that's the thing. The players on the team must be thinking, I'm not going to be around when that guy's going to have an effect. The coach, he could be gone by the time that player has an effect. The GM could be gone before that player has an effect with them, if it truly will be, 3 years sitting. I don't know if that will be the case. I think you see that. I'm an Eagles fan. When they drafted Jalen Hurts deep into the second round, a lot of people were upset that they wasted that pick when they could have gotten another player to support Carson Wentz at the time was their quarterback. And there was no doubt he was the long-term answer. Well, guess what? As it turned out, he wasn't. So it was more than just a 3 or 4 year down the road selection. Now, it also leads to something else, and I apologize to listeners of my Keystone Kickoff show because I went into this a little bit earlier this week, but I'm going to discuss it with you right now. Is this idea of, hey, the Rams, they've got this opportunity to get a first round quarterback in Ty Simpson. And the way my mind worked is, boy, do you really need to work so hard to get that first round quarterback? We have so many instances, don't we, of lower round quarterbacks performing, top quarterbacks not. You know, the old Tom Brady story, the Brock Purdy story. Even, I brought up Jalen Hurts late in the second round. So it leads me to this, Shaun. 32 teams in the NFL. How many? So 32 starting quarterbacks. Of the 32 starting quarterbacks, how many do you think have went in the first round of the draft?
Let's see. I'll go kind of right down the middle at 16.
It's actually 23.
Okay.
And not only that, but 19 of them, 19 of 32, went in the first 10 picks.
Mm-hmm.
Now, my reason for bringing that up, and I was surprised by that, I went looking for that information to prove a much different point. Okay. My hypothesis was, do you really need a first round quarterback? Apparently you do. That is where the majority of starters come from. They have that pedigree. Now it's not a guarantee, but I think the Rams are looking at that and saying, you know what? If you want that caliber of quarterback, you're going to have to get him in the first round.
Yeah, and I think my biggest takeaway with this pick is I trust what the Rams do. They've proven to be a very incredibly well-run organization. They're well-managed, they're well-coached. So when they do a move like this, I believe that one day Ty Simpson will be a legitimate high-level starter in the NFL. Like, I don't think they're doing this to miss on this pick. So while logically for their roster right now, I wish that they would have gone receiver or defense and bolstered something that's going to help them win this year and next year, I'm not going to go against what the Rams organization does because they've proven time and time again to be one of the best run organizations, one of the best coached teams in the NFL over the past, 5-6 years, really the Sean McVay era. So that gives me faith that they made the right choice here. And what I would say is the perfect scenario for the Rams is you win one more Super Bowl with Matthew Stafford. And then the second he says, I'm retiring, or the second you think his play is dropped, you start Ty Simpson and you keep on winning right there. That will prove that this was the correct move in the end.
Well, that's a lot of ifs going on there, Shaun. But spoken like a Rams fan, a guy from LA, so I understand. In general, though, the quarterback position, it was considered to be a weak draft for quarterbacks. So after Ty Simpson went number 13, we did have a ways to wait. Listeners to the Keystone Sports Network, many of them Penn Staters, many of them both Penn State fans and Steeler fans, in the third round. First, we had Carson Beck going at the top of the third round to Arizona. And then in the third round, Drew Aller, one of the most polarizing quarterbacks and players in college football, third round to the Pittsburgh Steelers. Your thoughts just on Beck and Drew Aller going in the third round? Were they picked too high, too low, or just right?
I think Carson Beck was probably just right in the third round. I don't know that he's going to be a starter in the NFL, but I mean, he has the experience. He has some of the intangibles you want in the quarterback position. That one made sense, especially to the Cardinals. A team, I believe they're going to start Jacoby Brissett right out of the gate this season. And at some point, Carson Beck will probably get some starter reps so that going into next year, hey, are you a guy who can potentially be our guy or not? Drew Aller, I was expecting fourth or fifth round, but I don't mind it at all for the Pittsburgh Steelers. He's going to sit, in all likelihood, Aaron Rodgers is going to be back for another year. And at this point in his career, I think Aaron Rodgers is much more open to mentoring a young quarterback than he was when Green Bay drafted Jordan Love, and Aaron Rodgers gave him a big middle finger for that move right there. So I don't know what Drew Aller's NFL career is going to look like. I think right now with what we've seen, there's a higher chance that he's not a starter in the NFL than he is, but we do know he has the characteristics and just the pure arm talent to be a legitimate starting quarterback in the NFL. So it's a great situation for him to go into behind Aaron Rodgers for a year, learn as much as you can, develop as much as you can, pick the brain of a, historically great NFL quarterback and see what you've got after that. So I don't fault the Steelers for, what I would say reaching a little bit for him. If they really see that potential and they know they have a situation where he can develop, you got to go try to get your guy at some point. And it's a 3rd round pick. It didn't cost them much.
Again, there's always the quarterback is so important in the NFL. You don't win without the quarterback. And if you think Drew Aller can be that guy, and I followed the kid all through his collegiate career, even prior, watched the video of him in high school. I'm still not sure what you're going to get with Drew Aller. Mm-hmm. What I am sure of is the arm talent.
Yep.
This guy, he's built like what you want an NFL quarterback to look like. Height 6'5", 235. Arm talent like crazy. Just incredible. If you get to see it up close, it is really impressive. But there's still a guy who will do things. He'll miss the easy pass. The loss in the semifinals a year ago to Notre Dame, people will talk about the late interception. No, to me, that wasn't a mistake. It was earlier in the game. He had an open Nick Singleton. They were inside the 5-yard line, an easy pass that he's probably made 10,000 times. And he, kind of held on to the ball too long, short-armed it. Somehow he ends up throwing it behind him. It was a short touchdown. So they settled for 3. It's a 4-point difference. That's the difference in the game. So there's those mistakes. And we spent the 4 years he was at Penn State debating, do his wide receivers get open for him?
Mm-hmm.
And that argument, great point that I heard someone put out there. The last 2 years, do you know how many wide receivers Penn State had get drafted?
I'm 1, 2, maybe 0.
0. So does that tell you the caliber of wide receiver that he had to work with? And just to add to all of this, Terry Smith, who was interim coach for a while, he was interviewed. He's from Pittsburgh, was interviewed in Pittsburgh about Drew Aller since he knew him so well. He actually said the words out loud. This Penn State offense was not designed for him. He was a bad fit. They didn't cater to him at all, which was really interesting to hear someone who was on the staff during this time. So that it's going to be very interesting to see how Drew Aller does there. I've watched him all these years. I have no idea. The other thing, sticking with the quarterbacks just for another minute here, Shaun, is were there teams who kind of held off on the quarterback because next year is supposed to be such a good year for quarterbacks coming out?
I think 100%, especially a team, we talked about the Cardinals taking Carson Beck. It's a 3rd-round flyer. They're not drafting him saying, we're out of the quarterback race next year. And same thing with the Jets who took Cade Klubnik from Clemson in the 4th round. They're taking him saying, hey, you've got a year to show if you're really this type of guy, but you're not high up on the payroll here. Next year, we are 99% taking a quarterback in the 1st round. And another team, too, the Cleveland Browns, right? Like they have Shedeur Sanders. From what it looks like, he's probably going to roll into the season as their starter. But if he doesn't perform, they took Taylor Green in the 6th round. Again, not a contract they're concerned about. They are saying, hey, Shedeur, you're either proving it this year or we are going to have one of these top picks next year and we are going to get our guy.
Excellent point. I don't think that there's any doubt those teams with a 3rd, 4th, 5th round pick of a quarterback are going. That's going to keep them from picking a quarterback next year. And Shador Sanders, you're right. He's going to get his audition. Just real quick, next year's quarterbacks, just listing Dante Moore, Julian Sayin, Arch Manning, Trinidad Chambliss, Darian Mensah, CJ Carr. You have a favorite?
Ah, man. It's difficult for me, and actually I'm going to need some help here. Was the quarterback mentioned who transferred from TCU to Indiana?
No, Hoover.
Hoover might be my favorite quarterback. And I don't know if he's drafted. I believe he's draft eligible after next year. Reason being for that, though, we saw what Curt Cignetti did with Mendoza. I think Hoover's a very good quarterback. I think he has, the skill set and the mental ability to read a defense. And I think Curt Cignetti is going to put him in a phenomenal situation where we may see some Fernando Mendoza 2.0 here. So that's a very early kind of bold take right there. From the ones you mentioned, though, between Arch Manning and Dante Moore, I would say Dante Moore. I think if Dante Moore did not play so bad against, I believe it was Ohio State. Was it Ohio State or Indiana that he lost to in the college football playoffs?
I'm trying to remember. You're talking to an old man. I forget too quick.
But if he did not play so poorly in the college football playoffs, he would have been the number 2 pick in this draft. Like if the college football playoffs never happened, he would be the number 2 pick. His atrocious performance, to be blunt about it, cost him a first-round draft projection. He's going back for another year of development. If he truly does develop in Oregon's system, I would say I think he's the front runner for the number 1 pick next year.
That's a good take. You're talking about Cignetti and Hoover, and if he turns him into, the top quarterback picked, or amazingly enough, if he gets another Heisman Trophy winner, at that point, if I'm a quarterback anywhere in college football, forget about offering me money to go to Indiana. I will pay you, Curt Cignetti, to take me at Indiana because he will have proven he is definitely the quarterback whisperer. All right. How about just in the rest of the draft? What's your favorite pick? Was there one or a handful?
There absolutely was my utmost favorite pick, Caleb Downs at 11 to the Cowboys. I do not understand how nobody in the top 10 wanted Caleb Downs on their team. I think he, at the end of next NFL season, or this coming NFL season, it would not shock me, Jim, if Caleb Downs is a top 3 safety in the NFL. I think he is that good. I think he will have that type of day 1 impact for the Dallas Cowboys.
I think that is a great call. I actually had Caleb Downs in my head also. And I think going into this draft, what we found out, there are positions that are priorities in the NFL. Obviously, quarterback. Obviously, offensive tackle. Edge rusher. These are the important positions. Even cornerback versus running back, safety, linebacker. And what was interesting in this year's draft is those low priority positions is probably where the best players were. So not just like Caleb Downs, who he might be the best player in this draft, but didn't go to until number 11 because he's a safety. And it was interesting, Jeremiah Love, as the best running back by far in this draft, he did go 3rd. He went higher than a lot of people expected. And I give Arizona credit for it because I'm with you. I would have taken Caleb Downs a lot earlier than that. I would have, if I were in the top 10, maybe even the top 5, I would have taken him. I want good players. I'm not sure I care quite as much what position they're playing.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think the hard thing when you look at Jeremiah Love is, we talked about this last week, if you're going to take a running back that high, is your roster ready for that type of a running back? And I mean, we saw the Giants do with Saquon Barkley, taking him at number 2, which was unheard of for a running back. And I would say, he had a net positive, value on the Giants. And the Giants just opted to not pay him, which was the dumbest move that they could have potentially made. Now, I think Jeremiah Love, if you're the Cardinals and you say, hey, he's by far the best player in the draft, why would you not take him? The thing I think is complicated with this is, can the Cardinals now build a roster during his rookie contract that's good enough to compete? And I just don't know if I have faith in Arizona being able to do that. So I think they got the pick right, but I don't know if they're going to get all the other pieces that make the pick worth it for them. Because by the time year 4 happens and let's say they pick up his 5th year option, well, he's already now has the largest contract of a running back in NFL history because he was slotted at pick number 3, which was well above what the running back market would put him at. He's not, assuming he performs, he's not going to want to take less money on his second contract in the NFL. So Arizona has their work cut out where they need to now build a roster. They cannot for 3 years be a rebuilding team in the NFL still, because now you're wasting the value that you have, because his price tag, assuming he's as good as everyone thinks, is only going to go up, and Arizona needs to be able to build a competitive roster tomorrow.
I'm going to give you a name as I don't think I want to call it favorite pick, but interesting pick. And I'll challenge you if you know this name, and I'm probably going to destroy the name. You are Bernard. Do you know who that is?
I don't. Is that the rugby player? I know there was a rugby player drafted.
He was from Nigeria. He's been involved in this NFL. They are looking to train international players have an interest in football. Now, this is a guy, if he was raised in the U.S., he would have been on a football field probably since he was 5 years old, okay? But internationally, that's not the case. So you can get these freak athletes. We saw the Eagles do this already with Jordan Mailata, their starting left tackle. This is a guy, look him up, Shaun. Find the picture of him. He is 6'4", 306 pounds, and does not look like he has 1% body fat, okay? It's an absolute freak. At over 300 pounds, he runs around a 4.6 40 at 300 pounds, a vertical jump of 40 inches, and a broad jump of almost 11 feet. That's the definition of a freak.
That is unheard of athleticism right there.
It is. It is crazy. He is slated to be a defensive tackle. Nothing against defensive tackles, but I think it'd be easier to learn that position than, say, offensive tackle. I think there's a lot more to the offensive line with the footwork, so many, different plays and things to worry about. So I am going to be following him. I'm not sure we see him set foot on the field this year. He'd probably be a demon on special teams, though, at that size and running a 4.6 40. So it will be real interesting to see if he makes it onto the field this year. All right, Shaun, as we get close to wrapping up here on with our time, just any final thoughts, anything else that you want to share with us on your take on the draft?
I think it's, the next big question is, when are any of these rookie quarterbacks going to start? And not to go back to the rookie quarterback question, but we may not see Fernando Mendoza on the field much this year. They brought in Kirk Cousins to be a bridge quarterback. I would probably say I do expect to see Fernando Mendoza start games at some point, but the Raiders have been very vocal that they don't want to rush the process. And I think Fernando Mendoza is okay with that as well. I don't think he's a guy who's going to get ego hurt that he's not starting week 1 after being the number 1 pick. I think he's ready to learn, absorb as much information, and then enter when the timing is right. Ty Simpson, we know we're not going to see, but will we see Carson Beck? Will we see Cade Klubnik start games at some point this year? I think it's always exciting to see an NFL quarterback's first start. So I'm excited for that part, Jim.
I'll tell you what, I'm with you. And the Raiders understand they are not a good team. They don't have, even if Mendoza starts game 1 and performs very well, they're still not going to win anything. He's just a building block, bringing in Kirk Cousins. definitely the route to take. Very smart by the Raiders. All right. That is it for this week's edition of Shauns Take. We hope you'll come back and join us again next week on Shauns Take.